In the quiet suburb of Oakwood Hills, Illinois, the summer of 2024 began with an air of normalcy for a couple married for 18 years. The husband, Dr. Benjamin Carter, was a renowned cardiologist at the local hospital, and his wife, Laura Carter, 45, had left her nursing career to manage their household. Their colonial home, with its manicured lawn and wraparound porch, stood as a symbol of their success, but beneath the surface, their marriage was fraying. Benjamin's long hours at the hospital and Laura's growing sense of isolation had created a chasm between them, one they both ignored until it was too late. The year 2024 was a tumultuous one for the United States, marked by a heated presidential election and a wave of political unrest. The country was deeply divided, with debates over healthcare reform, economic inequality, and judicial integrity dominating the headlines. Protests erupted in major cities, including nearby Chicago, as citizens demanded transparency in government and accountability for corrupt officials. The political climate seeped into every aspect of life, even in the seemingly insulated Oakwood Hills, where community meetings often turned into heated arguments over local policies and national issues. This backdrop of tension would soon intertwine with the personal drama unfolding in the Carter household. Benjamin's days were consumed by his work. Endless surgeries, late-night chart reviews, and weekends on call. Laura, who had once been his partner in the medical field, felt increasingly sidelined. She missed the adrenaline of the hospital, the camaraderie with colleagues, and the sense of purpose her career had given her. Over the years, her resentment toward Benjamin's absence grew, and she began to seek fulfillment elsewhere, though she hid her discontent behind a facade of domestic perfection. She joined a local book club, volunteered at the community center, and even started a small garden in their backyard, but these activities couldn't fill the void in her heart. One spring afternoon, Benjamin treated a new patient, Ethan Marshall, a 42-year-old construction contractor admitted with chest pains. Ethan was charming, with a disarming smile and a laid-back demeanor that contrasted sharply with Benjamin's reserved nature. During his hospital stay, Ethan struck up conversations with Laura, who often visited to bring Benjamin lunch or assist with hospital charity events. Ethan's easy laughter and attentive nature drew Laura in, and what began as innocent banter soon turned into flirtation. He complimented her wit, listened to her stories about her nursing days, and made her feel seen in a way Benjamin hadn't in years. Their connection deepened over the following weeks. Ethan, discharged but still under Benjamin's care for follow-up appointments, found excuses to linger at the hospital, often timing his visits to coincide with Laura's presence. One evening, after a hospital fundraiser, Ethan offered to drive Laura home when Benjamin was called away for an emergency surgery. The drive turned into a late-night coffee at a diner, where Ethan shared stories of his travels, building schools in remote villages, surfing in Costa Rica, living a life of freedom that Laura envied. The coffee turned into a kiss in the parking lot, the thrill of the forbidden igniting a fire in Laura that she hadn't felt in years. That night marked the beginning of their affair. Laura and Ethan's meetings became more frequent, their encounters fueled by secrecy and passion. They met at a small motel on the outskirts of town, where the neon sign flickered in the dusk, or in Ethan's truck parked in a secluded lot near the forest preserve. Laura felt alive again, her days filled with anticipation for their stolen moments. Ethan, for his part, was captivated by Laura's elegance and the way she seemed to blossom in his presence, though he also enjoyed the thrill of pursuing a married woman, especially one married to his doctor. Their affair continued for months, with Laura becoming increasingly reckless, leaving her phone unattended, forgetting to delete messages, and even mentioning Ethan in passing during conversations with friends. Benjamin began to notice subtle changes. Laura's mood had shifted. She seemed happier, but also more secretive. She often left the house with vague explanations, claiming to be meeting friends or running errands, and her phone was always locked, a new habit that raised his suspicions. One evening, while Laura was in the shower, Benjamin's curiosity got the better of him. He checked her phone and found a string of messages from Ethan, flirtatious texts, plans to meet, and even a photo of them together at the motel. Laura's arms wrapped around Ethan as they laughed. The betrayal hit Benjamin like a physical blow, his hands trembling as he scrolled through the evidence of his wife's infidelity. That night, Benjamin confronted Laura. The argument was explosive, their voices echoing through the house as years of pent-up resentment poured out. Laura admitted to the affair, her voice a mix of defiance and guilt. She accused Benjamin of neglecting her, of prioritizing his patience over their marriage, of leaving her to wither in his shadow. Benjamin, hurt and furious, couldn't bear to hear her justifications. He told her he wanted a divorce, his voice cold and final, and stormed out of the house, driving aimlessly through the night as he grappled with the collapse of his marriage. He ended up at a 24-hour diner on the edge of town, where he sat for hours, staring into a cup of cold coffee, the weight of betrayal crushing him. The next morning, Benjamin contacted a divorce attorney, determined to end the marriage swiftly. Laura, realizing the gravity of her actions, tried to reconcile. She attended therapy sessions, wrote Benjamin letters expressing her remorse, and suggested couples counseling, but Benjamin's trust was shattered. He moved into a small apartment near the hospital, unable to stay in the home they had shared, and pushed forward with the divorce proceedings. The political climate in the country added an extra layer of stress. Protests in Chicago over judicial corruption had led to a backlog in the courts, delaying their case and prolonging Benjamin's agony. The news was filled with stories of judges being exposed for taking bribes, manipulating cases, and abusing their power, a trend that made Benjamin uneasy about the fairness of his own divorce. The case was assigned to Judge Richard Holloway, a 50-year-old veteran of the local court system known for his stern demeanor. Holloway had recently been appointed to a higher position in the county court, a move that some whispered was due to his connections with local politicians rather than his merit. In the midst of the 2024 election cycle, Holloway was under scrutiny for his ties to a controversial state senator, Margaret Ellison, who was running for re-election on a platform of law and order, but was rumored to be involved in backroom deals. Holloway's appointment was seen as a favor, and his courtroom decisions were often questioned by legal watchdogs, though no formal charges had been brought against him, yet. Benjamin's attorney assured him that the divorce would be straightforward. Illinois was a no-fault divorce state, and their assets would likely be split equitably, with Benjamin retaining most of his earnings as the primary breadwinner. But as the proceedings began, Benjamin noticed something unsettling. Judge Holloway seemed unusually sympathetic to Laura, often siding with her on minor disputes and granting her requests for temporary spousal support without much scrutiny. Holloway's rulings were swift, and he dismissed Benjamin's attorney's objections with a wave of his hand, his tone sharp and unyielding. Laura, for her part, appeared confident in court, her demeanor a stark contrast to the tearful apologies she had offered Benjamin in private. Benjamin's suspicions grew when he overheard a conversation between Laura and her attorney during a recess, where Laura mentioned Richard in a familiar tone, hinting at a personal connection. Determined to uncover the truth, Benjamin hired a private investigator, a discreet professional recommended by a colleague at the hospital. The investigator followed Laura for 2 weeks, documenting her movements and uncovering a shocking revelation. Laura had been meeting Judge Holloway at a discreet hotel in a neighboring town, their late-night rendezvous marked by intimate dinners and long hours behind closed doors. The investigator provided Benjamin with photos, Laura and Judge Holloway walking arm in arm, sharing a kiss in the hotel parking lot, and entering a room together. The evidence was undeniable. Judge Holloway was Laura's lover, and his position on the bench gave him the power to manipulate the divorce in her favor. Benjamin's attorney filed a motion to recuse Holloway from the case, presenting the photos as evidence of a conflict of interest, but Holloway denied the motion, claiming the photos were inconclusive and accusing Benjamin of attempting to derail the proceedings with baseless allegations. Holloway's connections to Senator Ellison, who had influence over the local judiciary, ensured that his decision went unchallenged, at least for the time being. As the divorce trial progressed, Holloway's bias became increasingly apparent. He awarded Laura a disproportionate share of their assets, including the house, a significant portion of Benjamin's savings, and alimony payments that far exceeded what was reasonable given their circumstances. Benjamin's attorney fought back, arguing that the division was unfair and that Holloway's relationship with Laura tainted the proceedings, but Holloway dismissed the objections, his rulings swift and unyielding. By the end of the trial, Benjamin had lost nearly everything: his home, his financial security, and his faith in the justice system. The political climate only exacerbated his frustration. The public's outrage over judicial corruption was at an all-time high, Yet Holloway seemed untouchable, protected by his political allies. Devastated but determined, Benjamin refused to let Holloway and Laura's actions go unchallenged. He appealed the divorce settlement, hiring a new attorney, Margaret Stein, who specialized in judicial misconduct cases. Stein was a fierce advocate for justice, known for taking on high-profile cases involving corrupt officials. She had recently been involved in a class-action lawsuit against a group of judges in Chicago accused of accepting bribes, a case that had garnered national attention and fueled the ongoing protests. Stein saw Benjamin's case as part of a larger fight against systemic corruption, especially given Holloway's ties to Senator Ellison, whose re-election campaign was now under investigation for voter fraud. The appeal process was grueling, requiring Benjamin to relive the pain of Laura's betrayal and Holloway's corruption with every court appearance. The political unrest in the country added another layer of complexity. Protests in Chicago had escalated, with clashes between demonstrators and police making headlines daily. The hospital where Benjamin worked became a focal point for community tensions, as debates over healthcare reform spilled into staff meetings. Some of Benjamin's colleagues, frustrated with the government's handling of the healthcare crisis, joined the protests, while others, including Benjamin, tried to focus on their patients amidst the chaos. The stress of the divorce, combined with the national unrest, took a toll on Benjamin's health. He began experiencing migraines and insomnia, his once steady hands trembling during surgeries. Meanwhile, Laura and Holloway continued their relationship, emboldened by their victory. Though whispers of scandal began to spread through Oakwood Hills, the hospital became a hotbed of gossip, with colleagues and patients speculating about the affair and the rigged divorce. One of Benjamin's closest friends at the hospital, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a 47-year-old pediatrician, became his confidant during this time. Sarah had gone through a messy divorce herself years earlier and understood the pain of betrayal. She encouraged Benjamin to keep fighting, even as the political climate made justice seem elusive. Sarah also introduced Benjamin to a local activist group, Citizens for Judicial Reform, which was organizing rallies to demand accountability for corrupt judges like Holloway. During the appeal, Stein uncovered additional evidence of Holloway's misconduct, not just in Benjamin's case, but in several others where Holloway had shown favoritism to parties with whom he had personal connections. She discovered that Holloway had received campaign contributions from Senator Ellison's allies in exchange for favorable rulings, a revelation that tied his corruption to the broader political scandal unfolding in Illinois. Stein filed a formal complaint with the Illinois Judicial Inquiry Board, prompting an investigation into Holloway's conduct. The investigation gained traction when a whistleblower from Ellison's campaign came forward, leaking documents that implicated Holloway in a scheme to manipulate judicial outcomes for political gain. The political fallout was swift. Senator Ellison's campaign collapsed under the weight of the voter fraud allegations, and she withdrew her candidacy, leaving her allies, including Holloway, exposed. The Judicial Inquiry Board's investigation revealed a pattern of corruption. Holloway had accepted bribes, manipulated rulings, and used his position to benefit lovers and associates, including Laura. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Holloway was removed from the bench, disbarred, and charged with judicial misconduct. His arrest made national news, with headlines proclaiming the fall of a corrupt judge and linking his downfall to the broader movement for judicial reform. Protesters in Chicago celebrated the victory, seeing Holloway's removal as a step toward justice, though the fight for systemic change was far from over. With Holloway out of the picture, Benjamin's appeal was heard by a new judge, a fair-minded woman named Judge Eleanor Brooks, who had a reputation for integrity. Brooks reviewed the case with impartiality, overturning the original divorce settlement and ordering a new, equitable division of assets. Benjamin regained the house, most of his savings, and was relieved of the excessive alimony payments. Laura, humiliated by the public exposure of her affair with Holloway and the loss of her ill-gotten gains, moved to a small apartment on the edge of town, her social standing in Oakwood Hills destroyed. Ethan, the patient who had sparked the affair, distanced himself from Laura once the scandal broke, unwilling to be associated with the fallout. He even switched doctors, avoiding Benjamin at the hospital, though the damage to Benjamin's trust had already been done. Benjamin, though vindicated, found little joy in his victory. The betrayal had left deep scars, and the house he had fought to keep felt empty, a hollow reminder of their failed marriage. The political unrest in the country continued to weigh on him. New healthcare reforms, passed in the wake of the election, increased pressure on hospitals, forcing Benjamin to work even longer hours. He began to question his career, wondering if the sacrifices he had made for medicine were worth the personal cost. He confided in Sarah, who suggested he take a leave of absence to focus on his well-being. Benjamin took her advice, stepping away from the hospital for 3 months to reassess his life. During his leave, Benjamin threw himself into new pursuits. He enrolled in a photography course, finding solace in capturing the beauty of nature around Oakwood Hills. Sunsets over the lake, frost-covered trees in the forest preserve, and the first blooms of spring. His photographs became a way to process his emotions, and he organized a small exhibition at a local gallery, inviting Sarah, his friend Mark from the divorce support group, and other colleagues. The exhibition was a success, and Benjamin met Kate, a 47-year-old artist who had also experienced a painful divorce. Kate's warm smile and shared understanding of heartbreak sparked a connection, though Benjamin was cautious, not wanting to rush into anything new. Laura, meanwhile, grappled with the consequences of her actions. She continued therapy, trying to understand why she had risked everything for fleeting moments of passion. She enrolled in a nursing refresher course, determined to return to work and regain her independence. She also reached out to her old friend Emily, a 46-year-old teacher who had remained a steadfast supporter despite the scandal. Emily encouraged Laura to focus on herself, suggesting she volunteer at a local women's shelter to find purpose. Laura took the advice, spending her weekends helping women in crisis, an experience that humbled her and gave her a new perspective on her own mistakes. The political landscape in the country continued to evolve. In 2025, a new governor was elected in Illinois, promising sweeping reforms to the judicial system. The reforms included stricter oversight of judges, mandatory ethics training, and a public database of judicial complaints, measures that were directly influenced by cases like Holloway's. Benjamin, through his involvement with Citizens for Judicial Reform, became an advocate for these changes, speaking at rallies and sharing his story to highlight the need for accountability. His activism gave him a sense of purpose, a way to channel his pain into something positive, though it also brought him into conflict with some of his more conservative colleagues at the hospital, who viewed the reforms as an overreach. 5 years after the divorce, in 2029, Benjamin's life had transformed. He had returned to the hospital but reduced his hours, focusing on mentoring young doctors rather than taking on the grueling surgical schedule of his past. His relationship with Kate had blossomed into a steady partnership, built on mutual respect and a shared love of art. They traveled together, visiting places like the Grand Canyon and the coast of Maine, where they photographed landscapes and painted side by side. Benjamin's photography had gained recognition, and he published a small book of his work, dedicating it to Sarah and Mark for their support during his darkest days. Laura, meanwhile, had rebuilt her life in a small town in Wisconsin. She worked as a nurse in a rural clinic, where she found fulfillment in caring for underserved patients. She had started dating a schoolteacher named Daniel, a kind man who knew about her past but chose to see her for who she was now. She occasionally thought of Benjamin, wondering if he had found happiness, but she respected his silence, knowing she had no right to intrude. Holloway, after serving a short sentence for his crimes, had disappeared from the public eye, rumored to be working as a clerk in a small town in Ohio, his once powerful career a distant memory. The political reforms in Illinois had a lasting impact, with the state becoming a model for judicial transparency. Benjamin's advocacy work earned him a Community Service Award, which he accepted with humility, dedicating it to all those who had been wronged by a corrupt system. At the award ceremony, he ran into Judge Brooks, who had presided over his appeal. She congratulated him on his resilience, noting that his case had been a catalyst for change in the state's legal system. Benjamin thanked her, reflecting on how far he had come since that fateful summer in 2024. As Benjamin stood on the stage, the Chicago skyline glittering in the distance, he felt a sense of peace. The scalpel of betrayal had cut deep, but it had also carved a path to a new life, one filled with purpose, love, and the knowledge that he had turned his pain into a force for good. The political storms of the past had settled, leaving behind a stronger system, just as Benjamin had emerged stronger from his personal storm. He looked out at the crowd, spotting Kate's proud smile, and knew that he was finally home. Thank you for being with us. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.